Good morning. Good morning as everyone's coming into the room. Great to have you here with us today on this online event. Fabulous to see everyone coming in. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start with the house rules. My name is Linde. I am representing tax debt compliance today. And as I said, welcome to all professionals to this online event where we are going to give you information about how can you stop wasting unbillable hours on your clients who are in trouble with SARS. So just a couple of house rules before we start. We are recording the meeting. What you will see is that my screen is pinned and Gerhard's screen is pinned. Gerhard is the keynote speaker for today. I'll introduce him to you just now. So your screen won't be shown on the recording. So please, if you can, keep your video on. It is just good for us for interaction purposes. We will have questions at the end. So if you can leave your questions till the end, that will be great. And then we will definitely answer those questions. So would like to introduce Gerhard Linde, our keynote speaker to you today. Gerhard holds a master's degree in taxation from the University of Pretoria, and he is a chartered tax advisor. That is the leading designation from the South African Institute of Taxation, and it's an internationally recognized and respected qualification or mark as a mark of technical superiority and professional integrity. Gerhard is the director of tax debt compliance, and tax debt compliance specializes in assisting businesses who are not compliant with SARS, so who are behind on their SARS payments, to become fully compliant with SARS. Tax debt compliance has specialized in this area for over 7 years, and has dealt with a total tax debt of 200,500,000 rand in total tax debt, and has reduced that tax debt to 50 million rand in total tax debt payments, which resulted in total tax debt reduction of 75% for the clients who's dealt with tax debt compliance overall. The biggest tax debt reduction realized for one client was 97%, and tax debt compliance has a 100% success rate to date, as in none of the clients who put their trust in tax debt compliance have lost anything by owing tax to SARS. Tax debt compliance is compliant to the South African taxation law and acts. And we are also going to post a link in the chat box for you where you can see more information and testimonials from tax debt compliance clients. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Gerhard, and we are going to have this as an interview discussion. So I'm going to ask questions, Gerhard is going to answer, and at the end we will take more questions. I just want to ask Gerhard as a start. He just mentioned that there was a good result that he got for a client. So Gerhard, to straight jump into this conversation, can you share the news that you just received for one of the tax debt compliance clients, please?
Yes, sure. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dalian. Exciting to share this webinar with you all, and I hope you take some value add from this and see how we could assist you maybe in the future. Yeah, so I just thought, Dalian, just before we got onto the call, literally like a minute just ago, I got an email from SARS and one of my clients. They owed about 450,000 Rand across all tax types, and they secured, well, we helped them to secure a settlement of 40,000 Rand. So, I mean, they it's basically a 90% write-off on their taxes. So yeah, very good news for them. I haven't shared it with them yet because I'm on the call with you guys. So excited to get on the call afterwards to give them the good news.
Thank you, Gerhard. That is fantastic news. I think we can just imagine if you heard that there was a write-off of that amount on your tax. It just helps you again to take the next step in your business. So Gerhard, we put a couple of questions together and we'd like to get these questions answered for the professionals that are on the call and also other professionals in future if you are not watching the live webinar. So first question, Gerhard, why, in your opinion, is it difficult for professionals who work with clients who are behind on their tax payment with SARS? Why is it difficult for them to work with SARS?
Yeah, what we found in the history and since dealing with this matter is that there's probably three key aspects when dealing with SARS, and when it comes to people who don't necessarily focus on this aspect. And we found that the most thing is that either they don't have the time, they don't want to deal with SARS, or they don't have the knowledge to deal with SARS. And those three combined makes it a lot more difficult for people to deal with when it comes to how do I solve my tax issue with SARS. And that's why we want to step into this gap and try to fill the gap and see can we add value and not waste unbillable hours on these things, because you don't necessarily know how to bill your client as such. When you have these matters, it's time consuming, speaking to SARS, trying to find the right people. If you don't want to deal with SARS on a daily basis, because obviously if you've got your own time constraints, it just adds a lot of baggage onto what you're already trying to achieve with your clients in terms of your normal added service that you offer to your client. And those three combined makes it very difficult for people to find a solution. And obviously, as you all know, the first person in the firing line is when your client knows as debt with SARS is coming back to you, because you're the ones maybe preparing the financials or the tax returns. So the first ones to know there is an issue, and then look to you because you are the professional. How do we solve this issue? And it's very, very accurate in what you need to do in terms of you want to get a good result and not just go, on a flyby and say, well, we'll see what we can get right. So that in short is what we found over the last few years, the difficulty in working with SARS when it's not in your line of work per se.
Thank you, Gerhard. Appreciate that. So you speak about three things: not really having the time, not necessarily having the want to sort it out, because it is almost a grudge conversation that you're having because it's difficult, or knowledge. What exactly, in your opinion, is the expertise that is needed to sort out a problem like this with SARS when someone is behind on their tax?
Yeah, I think first off, it's very important to understand the process and what your rights are and what you can apply for. And those things play a huge role in when you're trying to take on someone like SARS and your client who is in trouble. So difficultly, if you don't know and you don't have the experience, you don't know what to ask for and how to put it forward, and following the exact process which makes sense to them, which gives a result to your client. And if those are a bit lacking, then the result that you want to is not always desirable when it comes back from SARS. And then once the answer, and then many times the answer is no, because obviously SARS wants everything and they wanted it yesterday. Then the problem is, okay, well, what do I do when they say no? And then there's a huge stumbling block. Then it's like, can I go back? Can I say no to them? And that's especially where we're trying to step in, is to say, well, this is, when we all take our gloves off and we try to get our hands dirty, is to say, well, this is, the rights that my client has, and this is how we're going to solve it. So I'm asking, when we look at these things, is to know exactly what our rights are, and then what our position of our client is, and then see, okay, well, this is how we're going to solve it, and by following exactly what the act requires us to follow, and we know what we can stand on, and then push ours to give us what we need in order for our client to continue to trade and to provide value add to our economy, and not be in a position where they lose money, or money's been taken and they have to close their business and not being able to operate.
Excellent. Thank you, Gerhard. Appreciate that opinion. I think it just gives more meat to the whole situation as to what can be done when you know and when you have the expertise to do it, like tax debt compliance. So in your experience in working with accountants and chartered accountants, working with professionals who deal with tax with clients, when working with SARS, what is the perspective of these professionals? What do they believe actually is possible? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, when we have had clients in the past and we've worked with the accountants, some of the things that stand out is that some believe that you can't negotiate with SARS. It means it's like it's in black and white. Whatever they say has to go, and you have to accept the terms that's been handed down to you. And that's a problem because most likely those terms are in most cases unaffordable. The client can't get to what SARS wants, and if you say no, then you don't know what the alternative is. So how do I go about making it, affordable? So that's point number one. There is a space to negotiate with SARS, and then on the second one that dovetails onto that one is that what we found in the past is that the professional, when they do the negotiation, they ask SARS for terms. We do it the exact opposite way. We tell SARS, what we want and what the client can afford. So, and that's based on our experience and expertise over the last several years is what is possible. So in those two combined, you will get a good result if you know your limits and you know where you can go, so that your client can actually, pay something that they can afford. Or in this case, what we've mentioned at the top of the show, is that there is a space for you to actually get tax off in terms of the compromise, which we'll talk about in just a second, just to allow your client to be able to breathe, because we have to obviously keep in mind that the taxes that's owed, if you talk about VAT and pay as you earn, and SARS will tell you very quickly, those are trust monies, which means it's not your money. You were supposed to withhold those monies to them, and they are entitled to the money, and based on that fact, that's why they give these unreasonable terms, because they say, well, it's never supposed to be your money. You can't use SARS's money to fund your own business as such, because that's normally what happens to people in the crunch. You use the money that you've had for pay as you earn and VAT, and when month end comes and it's tough, you need to pay salaries, and then they have to decide, am I going to take it from the pay as you earn or VAT that needs to be paid? And in most cases that will happen, because obviously if you can't pay employees or your creditors to keep the business doors open, so it's a tough decision to make. So within that, obviously SARS has had to have seen this issue, because they've made this available in Act, in the Tax Admin Act, for these solutions. How are we going to go about repaying? And so I won't say that they recognize it on such a level that they've given us some reliefs, but obviously in our country and the financial situations that we face, it's especially in South Africa, cash flow will always be strained, and it depends on which industry. Each industry gets hit at a different time, and that causes the cash flow issue that results in the debt.
Thank you, Gerhard. I think it just starts to shed light on this issue of what can be done and what is the perspective and what is reality when you work with an organization like Tax Debt Compliance. So what solutions are available for professionals who work with businesses who are behind on their tax with SARS? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So the Admin Act makes provision for, it's a very broad overview. In section 167 of the Tax Admin Act, that's a deferment agreement. That's an agreement where you apply to repay your debt over a period. So the Act doesn't give you exact, what can you ask for in terms of terms, how long the terms are that is allowable. And that's also a point of discussion when it comes to SARS, because they will tell you, if you speak to them over the phone or you say you want to apply, they will maybe push the envelope and tell you, well, we only give 6 months, or we only give 12 months if you're lucky. So, and in that space of the section 167 deferment is that, okay, well, I can ask, and you can structure it in a whole array of of applications of what can I apply, what is my terms that I can apply for, and how to break it down so that if SARS doesn't give you a full term of the terms that you're asking for, that you can at least try break it down over a few months and then try reassess the position. So with this deferment, it comes back to the expertise and knowledge and how to structure such a repayment so that you can actually get something in writing from them, and then keep the client compliant for at least a few months, and then try and look at the position again if they are unwilling to give you a longer term. So again, with that is knowing how to deal with the 167 if you want to go into deferment. And the second one, which was the one I mentioned at the top, was the compromise. That's section 200 of the Tax Admin Act. Now, the compromise is covered from sections 200 to 205, which you need to have adhered to the full sections, full 5, that gives an outline of how do you need to structure such an application and what is allowable, why would SARS need, what information do they need, to be able to give a compromise. So the gist of the compromise, and the Act says it, is to secure the highest net return for SARS. That means the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time that they feel they can accept for this compromise, which means that they feel that the offer is the best that they can get without, even if they have to pursue their own collection steps. And this is something that we have specialized in the last few years, is this compromises. That's the stat that Linde mentioned at the start, is that we've dealt with over 200 million odd of tax debt, and the 50 million that was repaid, that means the other 150 million had to be written off completely. So that includes tax. That's not just interest and penalties, that's tax as well. So it's definitely a possibility. So if a client qualifies for this compromise and the position is tough, then this section definitely helps just to get the slate clean and offers the clients a second chance. So that offers them, okay, well, I can start my business fresh. Obviously, when you look at compromise, the Act says that you can't apply for a compromise every time. So there has to be a time period that lapses for you to apply, because you can imagine you can't just rack up debt and then compromise and then redo the situation. And there's also a proviso that says if you don't keep up to date with your occurrence and you fall back to debt, that they can go back, cancel your compromise and reinstate the debt. So you have to be very careful, just not take liberty with this compromise, but actually use it when it counts, so that you can have this almost reset button when it comes to. So these two sections have been provided by SARS in the Admin Act for taxpayers who have tax debt, and to try, get to a second chance to say, okay, how can I revive my business and be compliant at the same time.
So I think that gives a lot more technical information about what is possible, Gerhard, and it underlines the fact that you really need to have the expertise. You can know the law, know the act. That's one component. Putting this together takes a whole different set of skills of understanding how exactly to do it and what can be done, and is also based on experience. So what are some of the latest success stories? You shared the one in the beginning of a client that you just heard about from tax debt compliance that you helped to become compliant with SARS. What are some other success stories that you can share with this professional audience, please?
Yeah, the success stories are the ones I pride myself on the most. Those are the special things that you get at the end to say, well, you've actually helped the client. You basically, which we'll get to this story now, the guy's direct words were, you saved my life. You can obviously go read some of the stories on our website, which helps us tremendously, with what we are busy with. It shows that we add value. So it's not just, this is a business that we do. We actually get these kind of people get back to us with these stories on how we help them. So this guy was an electric engineering company that did over 5 years, and the accounting was a mess. Everything was a mess, and they were non-compliant, which meant that they could not work, especially in the industry that they were in. So we sat with them, looked at the strategy, introduced them to the right parties to get everything up to date, and then worked on a strategy on how to go about, solving the SARS issue. He had a debt of over 950,000 rand. He ended up paying 100,000. So SARS, basically wrote off 900,000 rand. And that gave him the opportunity to start fresh. He was compliant and he could kickstart his business again and get new contracts and start his business fresh. And then the next one, which I would like to share, is that, that was a business. Just take it back. We had a single mom with 2 kids and she owned her own company. And she had debt across both spheres. So she owed debt in her personal capacity and in the company. So we had to try work with what she had and try to solve both issues at the same time with an offer that she could come up with. Obviously, she did not have enough to cover both. So what we ended up, a total debt was around 1.1 million. And the only thing that she basically had was a vehicle. So we sold the vehicle, took the excess of that was 100,000, and we split it over the company and her personal taxes, and we managed to get that right for her. So SARS accepted it both for individual part and for a company. So from the 1.1 million rand debts, she paid 100K. So that meant SARS wrote off about 1 million. And within that case, it was very difficult. Sometimes SARS had ridiculous things, from a point where they were telling us that she was living in luxury, etc., etc. And we had to go and prove why this, was not luxury. She lived close to the school for the kids to be able to drop them off and pick them up. And she was a single parent. And the house that she was staying in was below, in the area what she was renting. So we managed to prove SARS wrong in the sense of the things that they were telling us. So that was also a very good one for me to do, because it meant that she could also start fresh with the 2 kids and providing a lot of value. And then the last one that I wanted to share is that it's not always, you would think, in certain industries or certain people. We had recently had a senior advocate, and if you have to keep in mind, those are people highly educated, people who are very acute aware of what needs to be done. But certain things happened in this person's life, which amounted to a debt of over 14 million. It's not always planned. You can't always predict what the future holds, but these things happen to everyone. And we managed to put a strategy together with him. We consolidated assets. We looked at various aspects, and we came to an offer of about 7 million. And we were able to prove to SARS why this was the highest net return that they could expect. And with a bit of negotiation and application, SARS accepted. So he paid 7 million, and the other 7 was written off. So again, he's up to date with his taxes. Everything is up to date. They are compliant now, sticking to the rules, giving a second chance. So those are just some of the stories that we've been dealing with, and that's, as you can see, adds real value. And the clients will be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to continue with my life, continue with my business. And SARS on the other end is reaping the reward from, continual business, getting new revenue, paying their pay and paying their VAT that they are due. So by saving the company, SARS also secures, their taxes at the back end for the next how many odd years that follows these applications.
Thank you, Gerhard. I think from the feedback that we've also heard and clients, etc., it's often the client doesn't want to speak about it. They don't know if they can speak about it. How do you solve it? Is it legal? So there's so many aspects of that you are discussing, and the value that this brings to the economy, keeping those businesses open. So I'm sure that this next question comes up quite a lot as well. What's the average period to solve such a tax non-compliant problem with SARS?
Yeah, the answer normally is how long is a piece of string. It's very difficult to give exact time frames, because we have to keep in mind we are dealing with SARS, and within that they've got their time frames, and then obviously, like the scene, there might be some strikes, they might have internal issues. If you're struggling to locate the relevant person. So these are all delays that are non-factorable. You can't always factor in these things. So, I guess the average time frame would be at least 3 months until you get an answer on the compromise. and then to renegotiate if you need to. But those are more or less, and then the deferments, those can be within a month because you need to start paying as soon as possible, and they obviously on a deferment basis need to accumulate the money as quickly as possible. So the deferments might be a bit quicker, just depending on the situation. And with all of these, each client is unique and each client's position is unique. So no two are the same. So each application will differ, the position will differ, and the offer that we make will differ. So those all play a role in the time frame. And it also depends on the client's needs. Sometimes if your client, for argument's sake, might happen that your client needs to have a tax clearance, then you need to follow a certain strategy to get a tax clearance even before you've solved the bigger issue. So there might be a smaller issue that you need to attend to before you even get to the bigger issue. So those are all things that needs to be taken into account when you do your planning at the start of the engagement.
Thank you, Gerhard. Appreciate that. So if there are some professionals who would like to engage with tax debt compliance, how does tax debt compliance work with them, and what happens with the clients? Do they stay the clients of the professional? How does that work?
So as tax debt compliance, we are very niche in what we do. So this is what we do. We solve the issue of tax debt. We don't offer services apart from the partners that we have to take on your client and do their tax returns and do their financial statements, all the things that is the work of the professional. So what we try to do is we add value by taking the client, working with the professional to get the results of the client, and then get the client clean. Once the client's clean, he just stays in his normal routine. So the client, like you just mentioned, stays their client. So we are just there to offer value add when there is a need for it. So sometimes the accountant or the professional will call me and say, well, this is what we have, a client that we need to have resolved. Can you step in and help? And then we'll take the SARS problem on, which puts you aside in terms of dealing with them. And then we work together, getting all the documents needed to present such an application with the client. And then once that is solved, the client's clean and we are done. And then they continue as they were with you from the very beginning.
Thank you, Gerhard. So those are the questions that we set up to make sure that we give a good overview of what the service is, what the expertise are, what can be done for your clients. So do we have any questions? If you don't want to physically verbalize the question, you are welcome to, in the chat box, type it to myself, to the Linde, and I can voice the question on your behalf. If you want to have it anonymous, you are welcome to take that route as well. So question, Gerhard, how do you structure the fees?
Oh, yes. So we get the question a lot on the fees. So what we do is we obviously have a look at the client's position. What do they owe? The money that they owe to SARS plays a role. And then we structure a full fee to cover the debt part. So the fee covers the process with us. So it's called a management fee in terms of managing the debt. So it doesn't include compromise or deferment. It's managing the debt until you can get the debt resolved. So the client will know upfront what he will pay. So we will have an agreement with him to say, if we take on your problem, it will cost you this, and this is how we structured it, and it will cover your process until your debt is solved with SARS and you are compliant. So it covers the process. So it works twofold. The first way is that if we've dealt with your application and we've got a good result for you within a month, and it solves the SARS, the fee is still payable until our agreement ends. Or the very opposite is that even if your fee is paid up, but the result with SARS is not yet achieved, we continue the journey until the debt is dealt with. So it helps with the client. They know exactly what they're paying. It's not an hourly fee. It's not something that keeps on adding on. So if we get a good buy-in, if they know exactly what they're paying and the terms that they are paying for the service, and they understand the whole process. So that in a nutshell is just quickly how the fee with them is calculated.
Thank you, Gerhard. Please just type in the chat box if that makes sense, or if it doesn't make sense. We'd really appreciate that. Any other questions? So while someone is maybe thinking of what they want to ask, thank you for that confirmation. Appreciate it. We will also post there's a profile, a company profile for tax deed compliance. We will post that in the chat box for you. You will see it there where you can download it. The contact details for tax deed compliance for Gerhard is on there. And there's the post, so you can just literally download that. You can also get it on the website. The website address, if you go to Google, taxdc.co.za is the website address. So you can go on there. There's multiple videos about the processes that are followed, about questions, etc. There's a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page that is directly linked to the website where you can go and have a look for more answers, more questions. And you can definitely book a one-to-one discussion with Gerhard. As I said, details to connect with him is on the profile as well on the document. So any other questions, just to make sure we wrap that process up, please let me know if there's any other questions before we close. I'm also posting Gerhard's email address just for in case there. Some comments it's very informative. Thank you very much. Good to know someone out there likes negotiating with SARS. Absolutely. I definitely don't think that's an easy job. So I think important, make time, book the time with Gerhard that tax deed compliance can look to sort out the problems for your clients. It's also good just to know which door you can knock and what is available. Another question, does the client need to be up to date before they approach you? For example, I have to submit all their outstanding IT 14s before one can approach SARS for payment terms.
Yeah, it's also a very good question. Also something that's not covered in the Act, so you won't probably necessarily know. And so it doesn't necessarily give you the guidelines, but in the practice, before you can negotiate, everything needs to be up to date. So that's return wise. So you can't negotiate on a debt if there's still things outstanding, because then they don't know the scope of the debt that's outstanding. So it's very important as you start that the returns are up to date. So that means everything is laid bare for them. Everyone know what is the damage and what has been owed to them. And then on that you can negotiate. Then just following on to that question, and their very next important factor is that you keep up to date after you've engaged with SARS to say, I want to apply for any of the remedies, because that means you have to start building up compliance and a history so that you can, build up some good faith and show SARS that you are in a position to rectify the matter. So that means your current returns that are following, your VAT and your pay-as-you-earn are filed and paid on time. So that shows SARS that you are making an effort. So it doesn't help you keep falling behind and you ask them for a write-off. They will say, well, why should we write off this money if you're just going to fall behind next month? So there is a lot of planning that needs to go into, and your client needs to restructure some things to make sure that they stay on top of this, because it's like the compromise. It's a one deal thing. So if you get this thing, you just need to make sure that your processes are in place to make sure that you can stay compliant, and then show SARS that you are really wanting to solve this matter and you're coming to the party.
Thank you, Gerhard. Please, if you can also indicate if that answers your question in the chat box. If there's no other questions, thank you. Appreciate it. If there's no other questions, thank you for being on the live webinar today. If you are watching this or if you are on the live webinar, if this was valuable to you, please share this with your colleagues. Because many people are not aware that this service is available, that there's a trusted service like this, and that it allows them to still be in business and be successful at what they do. Gerhard, thank you so much. Thanks for the work you do at Tax Deed Compliance, for how you treat clients. You can also go and have a look at the reviews of Tax Deed Compliance to see just more about the character of Tax Deed Compliance and about Gerhard. And we're looking forward to connecting with you in future and to also see how Tax Deed Compliance can assist you. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.